Hi Joe, welcome to this CTQ Smartcast.
Harish, what, what, it's been a long day already. Glad that I'm here, looking forward to it. I need a little bit more coffee. See, it's because I didn't run this morning.
Right? So that's what a change of habits can do to you, right?
Yep, because one of the things is when you're following your habits, it's like the dominoes and it sets up one success from the previous success. And this is one of the things that everybody will find what works for them, and it takes a while to develop it. But once you get these base routines, it allows you to be able to have much more consistent output and mindset throughout your days, which then compound into having a much better overall output. This is one of the reasons why you see professional athletes, whether it's a cricket player or a baseball player or basketball player, they have their pre-game rituals and their routines when they're getting ready to go on up and bat that gives them that almost mindset and allows them to achieve the state of flow to be able to move forward.
Yeah, yeah. So you've already touched upon most of the themes that we wanted to cover today,
All right,
Joe.
we're done.
Yeah. So I wanted to really pick your brains about habit building and compounding for excellence. You've used the word compounding already, like not even 5 minutes into the conversation. And we are big on compounding. We actually run something called as CTQ Compounds. Compounding is a core value for our company. We're very serious about being consistent about something, doing those small actions on a daily basis. I have been on a reading compound, our internal reading compound. We finished 1500 days a few days ago, where we've been reading everything, something together as a group. So we really are big on compounding and habits. But before I talk about what I know, I wanted to ask you, what is it that you know about habit building and compounding that others don't?
I know a lot of this because I've screwed it up in the past. And so that's one of the things that lessons need to be emotionally connected with the individual. So if it hurts, you're going to remember it more. If you've got embarrassment because you weren't prepared for the meeting or in a game, you got absolutely destroyed because you didn't do the work up front, that's the sort of lesson that is going to stay with you a lot longer than having the teacher or the boss say, here you go, and have it all written out for you. So it's that emotional tie that makes things have longevity. So don't be afraid of somebody screwing up. In fact, somebody screwing up a little bit is actually one of the best things to potentially happen because they will never make the same mistake again. They will have something to laugh about, hopefully, and they will get the meta lessons around it of what they need to do to get better overall. And that's one of the things about compounding is that people need to figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them is equally as important and get emotionally involved in it because it's important to them. It's not this goal imposed down from on high by the boss or the home office or anything. They need to be doing it because they want the results. They want to fit into that suit for their high school reunion, or they want to be able to run that ultra marathon, or they want that next rank in the martial arts, or they want to finish this degree, or they want the division to reach a certain goal so that everybody benefits and gets bonuses. Whatever it is, it needs to be very internally driven because externally imposed goals and disciplines fade away as soon as those external reinforcements are removed.
Yeah, yeah. And we've seen that the role of emotions in getting people really motivated about picking on such habits or such
Mhm.
journeys is often it's undervalued. People don't get it. People feel that, oh, I give you a very rational explanation that yeah, you need to lose weight or you need to be fitter, and that's it. That's enough for people to go get going. What have you seen about this?
As Friedrich Nietzsche said, if you have a strong enough why, you can bear any how. So
Right.
training for an ultra marathon sucks at times. It's 5 o'clock in the morning and I gotta get up and I gotta go do 7 miles, or actually I get to do 7 miles, then go work for the day, and then I get to go and run again for another hour after work. And people will be looking at that like, why? It's because I want what comes with it. I want the feeling. I want to challenge myself. I want to push myself. I went to sleep every single night and woke up every morning for over 6 months when I was preparing for one of my first major tournaments, visualizing how I was going to win that tournament with instant hook kick. And when it came to the moment in the tournament, that's exactly why I ended up executing. Because the why was so important, I was able to get through the house, the little injuries, the doubts, the, oh, I'm tired from having a really long day at work. No, I still need to train because that's more important than rest and recovery at that point. Having that emotional involvement, and you see this with a special needs parent. You see this when you've got somebody who's taking care of a parent with Alzheimer's or with a friend who has cancer. Okay, the why, the emotion becomes so strong that we overcome these other limitations. So if management imposes the goal, that's an external thing and people won't buy into it. But if the goal is I'm going to do X because that allows me to be able to take my crush on this trip that she's always wanted to go on, and so there's a lot of emotional value in it, it's really important to me, then I'm going to do it. So, for example, one of my reinforcers, one of my goals with the book is to hit a certain number of sales. And I told my 11-year-old autistic son that when I reach that goal, we're going to go to Disney World. And every day he's, Dad, did you do it? Dad, did you do it? And so how am I going to look at this cute little 11-year-old with big eyes and to say, no, I was too lazy. I didn't feel like picking up the phone and scheduling those things or doing those reach outs or doing that fifth podcast for the day or whatever it is, because I just didn't feel like it. So you don't get to go to Disney. What sort of horrible human being would I be to have that capacity? So having these reinforcers that help the internally driven disciplines and goals, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, I didn't need discipline because I loved what I was doing. If your focus is that emotionally bound into your being, then it becomes a lot easier. You don't need as much discipline. Yeah, there's some tough days where you gotta overcome the lethargy or the other distractions, but it's a lot easier if your belief system is completely aligned with what you're trying to achieve there.
Right. Yeah. And I'm also a big believer of appealing to the identities that people want to see themselves as, right? That I'm an X kind of a person. I'm a person who runs all the time. If I appeal to that identity, we've seen change is much easier to bring about and using influence rather than, like you said, issuing a directive saying, come on, now you have to do this. That usually doesn't last for too
Right.
long.
And so that's one of the reasons why Run the Year is such a good thing. Run the Year is a virtual race that people can do as an individual or as a team. And you're literally running the number in the year. So this is the 8th year that they've had it. So 2022 miles, last year was 2021, a couple years ago was 2016. And every year there's a different medal, but you can see this year's medal over there. You get the medal right up front, and it has some sort of tracking mechanism in it. So this one's got a maze, and you move the little dude around the maze to get to your whatever your goal is. A couple of years ago, actually, I think I've got it sitting here. It was a watch
Mm-hmm.
with hands. See if I can open it without breaking it. That would be on the list of not cool things. Oh, okay. And the hands, you move them to track your mileage. So you have something like that where you're getting that feedback mechanism, but you're also part of a community. So you're posting, you get these things, but you get this up front. And for most people, if you're given something up front, but then told you have to continue to work for it to fully earn it, most people are actually going to step up.
Right.
And so that's something that we can learn from a management point of view is treat your people as if they are already good enough. empower them to make the decisions, support them and guide them, but let them do the work. And you're going to see growth of individuals that you're not even going to be able to comprehend, because they will go above and beyond if it's the right culture and you brought in the right people and have supported them properly and empowered them. They're going to grow in ways that you didn't even conceive of beforehand.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very valuable, lesson for a majority of our, listeners who are in the category of managers, leaders, founders. I'm sure they're going to find this very, valuable. But let me get back to the second part of the conversation where we wanted to talk about how these people that we're talking about, what they can learn from you from a personal standpoint, right? And this is where I wanted to talk about your book. Tell us more about the book that you've written and why did you even decide to write that book?
So the wise is weird in a lot of ways, just like many things in my life. So it was a combination of multiple different influences. I was going through a divorce at that point. We were at the height of COVID, so everybody's struggling. One of my friends who's an attorney was like, "Dude, why don't you just be my life coach? Because you're so much more than what it says on your business card. You help with this and that. You bring in all these different factors based on your Renaissance man background." So the book, I was working out and listening to a podcast, Jocko Willink, and all of a sudden it hit me that excellence is a habit, and habits need to be achieved every day. So we need something to help people every single day create the habits or reinforce the habits needed for them to have the human kaizen or continuous growth. And so I literally put down the kettlebell, ran upstairs, sat down at the computer, and brain barfed out for about a half hour of the concepts and ideas. And then it got into the research and the writing on it, which the research part of it had been being done for 30 plus years because of my continuous self-development. I'm not an athlete. I'm more of a mathlete than an athlete, but I've run multiple ultra marathons and Ragnars, and I've been an international champion martial artist. And I've participated in all these different things because of having the vision and then doing the hard work. And so the book was a lot of the same sort of approach. You have the vision, you break it down into a plan, and then you execute on your plan every single day, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah, and at this point, I also wanted to talk a bit about your influences because you spoke about the martial arts, spoke about running, but you, as I read, you're also a reformed physicist. So there's also
Yep.
that engineer who's trying to break down complex systems into smaller things, which is what you seem to have done here. So how have all those different influences shaped your thinking? Did they contribute to coming up with this aha moment that, oh, this is what I was setting my life for the last 30 years? Was there
No,
something like that?
and there, one of the things is that if we look at life like a video game, okay, and we're trying to get to the end where we have the castle and the princess and all the gold and all that, but to get there, you have to go through all these trials and tribulations. You need to level up, which is part of what I call aging at this point. I'm not getting older, I'm just leveling up. But
Right.
also, you get different skills, you get different resources. And with life, we go on all these different side quests. And some of them might just be for fun. That's what a vacation is. Some of them you're trying to acquire resources, whether it's people or knowledge or skill sets. And that's what doing the martial arts has done. That's what doing ultra marathons has done, is it's further enhanced my resiliency and my reserves, my capability to continue when I'm physically and mentally and emotionally done. You still have stuff in the tank to keep going. Okay, and so that's what pledging does in a fraternity. That's what boot camp does in some ways. That's what Hell Week does if you're looking at Navy SEALs. So you end up testing yourself to these extremes so that when you're doing at a smaller level but consistently every single day, you're like, I can do this. I can do this. I only have to write for a half hour. Not a big deal. So getting these diverse influences and skill sets and mindsets that you can then draw back in which makes you better as a person. So for example, a lot of my friends are engineers, went to an engineering school, RPI, oldest engineering school in the English speaking world. So some of these individuals are just absolutely brilliant in their space, but because they're so narrow, they are forced into a strict linear path versus the ones who have all these outside influences, whether it's from doing a sport or reading or having a hobby like being able to paint or things like that. They can then take influences from there and bring it back into their main pursuit, which then gives them additional abilities to overcome obstacles, to think about problems from a different perspective, to overcome different things that occur. And so by taking time away or seemingly dispersing their energy, it actually allows them to have more for when they're going through these things. And that's ultimately what our careers and our businesses and our lives are like in a lot of ways.
And were you always like this, or did you make a very deliberate attempt to collect these dots so that you can connect them later?
I've always been this way in some capacity, in that, like when I was 10 years old, I told my mom that I wanted to learn everything that there was to learn.
Mhm.
And my mom, being my mom, the former nun and professor, she said, "You better get to work." And okay, so she's okay. She encouraged me, but she's like, "All right, if you want to do that, it's on you. And these are some of the things that you need to do to achieve it." And that was the same attitude with building a business, with going back to graduate school, with writing a book. It's okay, you want to do this. It's going to be work. It's on you. And this is part of a way to be able to tackle that problem, whatever that situation is, whether it's sending a person to the moon or building a business or your relationship or doing something physical, a sport, or learning how to play an instrument. Those are all the same sort of thing. You have this big idea, and then you need to break it down and start on your individual path of mastery to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've also read that you're very big on habit stacking. So, can you briefly walk us through how you stack your habits? What's
Sure.
your routine like?
So for people who are not familiar with habit stacking, look at, like, for any action, there's going to be a consequence that comes out of it. So if you want to focus on the consequence, whether it's a good consequence, like being able to run 10 miles, or a bad consequence, having an alcohol addiction or something like that, there are things that lead up to that. So if you find that you're always going to drink around certain individuals, you might want to cut them out of your life, which is what one of my friends who's recently out of rehab is going through, is removing those bad influences. If you've got an app on your phone that always leads you to do go to bad places emotionally or other things, removing the app from the phone removes the triggering event for those habits. Okay, so that's partially habit cracking, which is removing the bad habits, but you can also have the reverse of habit stacking. And so the simplest place to start is when we get up in the morning, because we all wake up. If we don't, then it's a different situation that you have to deal with, but that's beside the point. So we get up in the morning. So what do you do immediately after you get up? What's A, then B, then C, then D? How do the dominoes get arranged and be able to move forward? So for example, when I was working on the book, I would get up, I would go grab my half cup of coffee that I left there from the night before to prime the pump, basically, turn the coffee pot on, because the coffee pot was prepped the night before, so it'd be ready that day. So this is some pre-planning that you need to do, is looking
Right.
ahead, thinking strategically to allow yourself to these things. I would just have that half cup of coffee while the other coffee was going. I would do 100 punches with each hand, something that I've done every single day for decades, and we can talk about that, to get the blood flowing, get my mind ready. I would sit down, I would read. I was reading The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Now I'm reading The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. I would read my book every single day. And then I would sit down, I would write for 5 to 10 minutes, just get the stuff out of my brain that was there from the sleeping. Get up, refill my coffee, go and work out for 20 minutes, setting a timer so it's 20 minutes basically on the dot. Then, because my brain was then in fully activated mode, I would sit down and I would write 2 days of the book minimum every single day. So I had these habits. I do X, then I do Y, and then I do Z, then I do A. So I would do these things. And so by the time that 45 minutes was expired in the morning, I had already read, I had already learned, I had already worked out, I had already produced writing. And that's how I started every single morning. So whatever happened from that point, I had already accomplished a tremendous amount, but my day was prepped and set for the rest of the day. And one of the things is that every day is a new page in the book of life, but there are some carryovers from previous parts of the story. And we can change that story throughout the day. But once you're along a particular path or a particular idea, the amount of change that you can have is not great. So if you're going to have that particular day be its own vignette, its own independent thing, you should set it up in a way that you know is going to give you the highest probability of decent outcomes.
Right. Yeah, I think this is fantastic. Like you said, every day is different, but if you prepare for it, you can make every day special as well. And then you can make that first 1 hour of the day or whatever is your most valuable time, you can make the most
Mhm.
out of it.
Yeah,
Right.
John Le Carre talks about allocating your most difficult tasks or your most important things with when you're at best. I'm a morning person,
Right.
so I'm up before dawn typically, and that's why I crank stuff out. Other people might be at their best mid-morning or mid-afternoon. You know what? Figure it out and try and build your day to take advantage of that. And if you're in a situation where you can't because there's a misallocation between your circadian rhythms and what the needs of that organization are, that should be a sign that you should not be there long range.
Yeah, yeah. And now that you've mentioned about organization, I wanted to ask you about whether you've actually made a deliberate attempt at drawing parallels and analogies from what all we have discussed till now. Things like habit stacking, things like preparing for the day, things like timing your priorities into the corporate sort of group of people, because you can come up with similar rituals for an organization to build the kind of culture that you're looking at. So, have you done something around this yourself?
Absolutely. So, for example, my I had an assistant who she was a morning person too. So she actually would come on into the office at 7 a.m. and be very effective in the morning. And what we would do is I would actually make sure I left her alone and she left me alone. I was meeting with clients. She'd be doing her stuff because by 11 a.m. in those 4 hours, we each accomplished more than almost anybody else in our office in our respective components because we knew that's what we did best. And so we'd roll in, we'd do it, boom. And it got to the point where her normal schedule is 7 to 3:30. At 2:30, if she was done with everything, I'm like, get out of here. All right. You did awesome stuff. Friday afternoon, go see your kid, go to the beach.
Right.
During the summers, Thursday afternoon, I actually closed the office for a half hour because the ice cream truck would come by. And if we had hit our goals for the week, then we ended up having ice cream every Thursday afternoon. And so my team was motivated to achieve what we needed to do for the entire week by Thursday at 2 p.m. because they could hear Mr. Dingaling coming and they wanted that. And that was not me saying we need to do this as a team. That was putting a reward out that was aligned with their wants and belief systems and let them run wild and they achieved it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing I've heard you talk about is doing one thing at a time. So, can you tell us more about how it has benefited you and did it change? Were you doing multitasking earlier and you realized that no, this is not how it should be?
I still multitask in a lot of ways because I want to maximize what I can get out of things. So, for example, when I drive to the office, I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening
Hmm.
to educational things or motivation. When I was preparing for my first marathon, I was also preparing for the CFP exam. So I would get up at 4:45 in the morning, drive to the gym because running in January in upstate New York, not great. But 5 o'clock in the morning, I would jump on the treadmill, but I would also be listening to educational material, tax code, on my headset for that 7 to 8 miles that I was cranking out that morning. So what I would do is, knowing that I couldn't sit there and study for that 90 minutes that I was working out, I found a way to blend them. Now, was my studying as effective as if I was just purely sitting there? No, but I was still able to squeeze in an extra 2 or 3 hours a day of that by doing it. And even if it's only 75% as effective, just because of the volume around it, it was able to be successful. But if I'm doing something like creative endeavors, I'm sitting there writing blog posts, I literally set a timer so that I'm focused and can take Pomodoro 20 minutes hardcore on it. And I will have no distractions. So I close the door, I turn off the phone, I either play some music that sets the mood. So the other day I was writing about pirates, so I was playing Pirates of the Caribbean stuff to get the emotional feed, or I'll play some Tongling meditation music, or I'll just play the sound of rain or something like that. And I literally just, everything else is aside, boom, and I work hardcore on this for this time period.
Yeah, yeah. Figuring out what works best for what kind of work, I think, is the
Mhm.
key to getting this
And
right.
not just the type of work, but for the individual. And this is where
Correct.
some of the metacognitive awareness comes on in. Remember how we were talking about how lessons should be painful a little bit because you learn best from them? People need to experiment with what works best for themselves to maximize their performance. So some people don't want to go and run before sitting there and writing simply because they're sweaty or they're out of breath or whatever, and it doesn't work for them. But you need to try it to see if it works for you. Do it in a low stakes environment, obviously, but figure out, okay, my tendency is that I am at my best performance at, under these circumstances. Or if I do X, it sets me up to do this type of work. And understanding that and building your day and your organization, if possible, around that. I've worked in organizations where it's been all suit and tie every day for everybody because it was in financial services. And we had certain structures that produced the best overall outcomes in aggregate, but people were allowed to earn their way to having slightly different requirements if they proved that they could do it. And so that's where you get that balance of mass customization, where this is what we do in general, but this is how we tweak it and personalize it to maximize the performance of the individual. And that's one of the arts of management, is understanding what's important to your people and why, and how you can allow them to have that flexibility while still maintaining the integrity and consistency of the organization.
Right. So one thing that struck me, Joe, when you were mentioning this, is that a big component of this meta thinking is reflection. You
Mhm.
need to reflect on the different experiments that you've conducted, what was the feedback, and then tweak accordingly. So in the world of sports, you will have your coach who will do that job for you. But what we see is most people on related to day things like how does my energy level vary through the day and what should I do differently.
Mhm.
That reflection component is missing because there's no coach out there. So how do
Well,
you address this?
one thing is they're not necessarily keeping the numbers either. So, for example, people who are in sales know how many calls they're making and how many people they're reaching and how many closing attempts they have and the results
Right.
of it. And they can look at stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so that's a very sports like idea of keeping score and looking at your parameters. So whether it's RBIs in baseball or number pass attempts in soccer, what have you, finding the right numbers to look at and tracking them so that you understand and can see where there's need for improvement, and also getting to that higher level of, if you've got sufficient data, like I've got all my recorded numbers going back to 1995 sitting over there actually, so I knew always I was a little bit better in the morning, but I had very strong statistical data to support that. Like literally 75% of my production was occurring before 11 a.m.
Right.
And by the time you reached 5 p.m., it was down to essentially nothing.
Hmm.
Okay, after 5 p.m., I'm not going to do any of the sort of work that leads to that. I'll go to events and hang out with individuals and stuff like that. My numbers showed that I was ineffective, so I'm going to tweak what I'm doing in my schedule around that to be more effective with it. So there's that. And then there's having other people who are willing to look you in the eye and tell you the truth. One
Hmm.
of the biggest producers in one of my old companies said that was the key to his success, was that's what he did with clients, and he expected the people in his universe to do that. So my closest friends will tell me when I'm screwing up. That is the difference between a friend and an enabler. An enabler will make you feel good in the moment, will tell you everything's glorious. Here's a cupcake, and look, there's rainbows and unicorns and all that stuff, and blow smoke up your butt. You don't need that. That's not going to make you better. Okay, Derek Jeter, the former captain of the New York Yankees, was actually upset that his manager, Joe Torre, did not tell him the harsh truth earlier, saying, if you do this, you can be better.
Right.
Okay. Friends want what is best for their friends, even if it hurts, whether it hurts that person, the friend, or themselves. So I make little sacrifices to help my friends because that's what friends do. Okay. I will tell my friends the truth, even though they don't want to hear it right now, because it makes them better overall. And I'd rather that they become better than to feel good in the second and be on a path that actually makes them much worse long range. So having those people around you that can give you that feedback, and it's tough love. When my friend tells me, dude, you're being a jerk, oh, okay, I need to listen to it because they've earned that. What do I need to do to be better? Okay. Same thing, my martial arts instructor. Hey, you're doing this wrong. Do this and it's better. Okay, thank you. My cello instructor years ago, same sort of thing. Your friends and your peers in business that you care about should be doing the same thing so that you can get better as a communicator, as a leader, as a manager, as a business owner, as a cook, as just a friend in general. Having that feedback mechanism is critical because, as you said, we can't see ourselves very easily. We can see our front in a mirror, we can't see our back very easily. So we need our friend to say, dude, you got something on you. You need to fix this. Here, let me come up, and they fix your collar for you. Essentially, you're asking for them to do that with non-physical components of who you are, because we have these blind spots that we just develop over time. So a good friend is not exactly like you. A good accountability partner is not exactly like you, because that way you don't get the echo chamber. You get some challenge, you get some pushback, you get some new ideas that you didn't have that then help you grow as an individual.
Yeah, yeah. So collect more means of feedback. It could be numbers, it could be data, and definitely people who can actually, speak the truth to you.
And people who speak the truth are doing it because they care about you. They want to
Right,
see the best version of you.
right.
That's the sort of person that you should treasure.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a truth bomb out there, which we will definitely use in our promos for the conversation when we post this. Following up on the whole compounding philosophy, right?
Mhm.
One reservation that I've seen from people is that it seems a very small action, right? The delta is very small. Every day I'm going to just do 0.01% maybe. Yes, over a period of time, we know it can lead to huge change, but it seems very small. So when somebody has this kind of a reservation, how do you convince them otherwise?
One way can be very visual, like literally draw out what a 1% improvement is and draw it not just over a couple of months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and you start getting way up here versus the difference. Make it physical for them in some ways. So give them like, have them like hold the bowl, put a penny in it, put another penny in it, keep putting the pennies in it, and it gets heavier and heavier. And then what you do is you do that and then say, okay, but now we're doing compounding. And so instead of putting a penny in, now you're putting two pennies in. And you're putting 3 pennies in a pop, and they can feel it's getting heavier and heavier, faster and faster. So give them something that they can feel, something that they can see, something that they can experience, because people learn in different manners. Give them multiple different feedback mechanisms so that they are buying into this on a very emotional and physical level besides just the intellectual level, because everybody knows, oh yeah, that's great, but until you can literally feel that, so literally feel what it feels like to cross the finish line in a marathon. If you can embody that feeling earlier on, you're going to make the sacrifices along the way to get there. Embody what it feels like to make the bad choices. So one thing that you can do if you're trying to work with somebody on their health, have them put on a couple of sweaters and then try and put a jacket on. It's tight, it's uncomfortable. Tuck it in, they can't tuck their pants in. They're like, oh, this sort of sucks. That gives them a real visceral feeling of it. And then give them the image of what it would be like on the other way. Because every single day we either get a little bit better or a little bit worse. And the little bit better takes the sacrifice. You got to get up so you're tired. You got to sweat so you're smelly and gross potentially. You get hungry because you're cutting down your calorie intake so that you can lose weight a little bit. If you're a smoker, you're going through smoking withdrawal. If you're a drinker, you're going through alcohol withdrawal, whatever it is, so that they can get through those harder parts. Same thing with saving money. I used to do a demonstration for young people just getting out of college, and I literally had stacks of fake money. And so I would be talking with them, I'd be dropping the stacks, boom, boom, to create that reinforcement. Because, yeah, oh, yeah, we're hearing up here intellectual, but the neocortex is actually the weakest component of our brain. Our limbic system and our crocodile brain essentially are so much more powerful. So we need to tap into those components and use that to then support what the neocortex is saying. This is intellectually the right thing that we should be doing. I know I should be doing this. Yeah, knowing and doing are different. But if you know that you need to do it, but you also feel like you need to do it, it's emotional. It is just part of what you're doing. Not doing the right thing feels bad, then you're going to do the right thing, whether it's cutting down calorie content or not going into potentially temptation situations or saving the money or running the miles, whatever it is. If you make it feel good, even though it's not, if you're tricking your brain, as Jack LaLanne, the fitness expert who invented Nautilus, said, if you can make yourself believe that a red pepper tastes as good as a chocolate bar, you're going to succeed. And so it's being able to find different ways to trick or nudge, if you want to use what Thaler actually got the Nobel Prize in economics for, nudge yourself into making the better choices. If you consistently make better choices, you're going to get better results, because we make someplace between 10 and 25,000 individual decisions every day. Micro decisions in a lot of ways. So, as they say in Deadpool 2, Colossus is trying to talk to Deadpool into not doing something stupid. It's 4 or 5 moments. That's all it takes to be a hero. 4 or 5 micro decisions every single day is what it takes to move yourself up or move yourself down. 4 or 5 micro choices every single day, and you've got that 1% improvement. And so 4 or 5 choices every day, and you make it so that those choices are easier by setting up your environment and doing the right things around that. 4 or 5 choices every single day, you're getting that 1% improvement, and you're getting your longer range compounding that you were talking about, Harish.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I can see a lot of parallels between what you spoke and how, say, leaders and founders can think about building a culture in their organization as well. Building those small rituals, doing the grind every day.
The grind, but also it's having the belief system
Correct.
that everybody's working for the same thing. In the Bible, there's in the book of Proverbs, it says, a people without a vision will perish. There's another saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. If you have this vision of this is what we want to achieve, and then you get people who believe in that vision, you'll figure out the way.
Right.
You will figure out, okay, go over the boulder, around the boulder, we can do these other things. Okay, it's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. As
Right.
Jocko Willink says, good. So if this is the goal, this is the mission, we want to achieve X, whether it's write this book and hit New York Times bestseller, or we want to do 1 million units of whatever product we sell, or we want to reach 10 million users across the country or across the continent within a certain time period. If everybody gloms onto that mission, if everybody's bought into that, then, as Jim Collins said, you can get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. People know where they're going. They know what they need to do. They're buying in. And so they're like, oh, if I do this affects this person over here, this can help them out. Or, hey, if we tried this or change, this will move us forward. And then you've got this harnessed brain power of everybody because they're focused on achieving this one aim. And that's the reason why they talk about commander's intent. What
Correct.
does the general want in this situation? Okay,
Right.
we need to take out the Germans. We need to stop these people from invading. We need to achieve X. So everybody buys into that and they're willing to do whatever it takes to achieve that because they all believe together.
Right. Yeah. 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 And everyone is
Okay.
pulling in the same direction then.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So coming back to your book, Joe, did you use any of these compounding philosophies to actually write the book? Did that change did you approach the process of writing the book any differently?
Well, one of the things that I did with approach writing the book was that I first, how I write books is I figure out what I want the overall vision to be in a lot of ways. Then I build the structure. So, like with this book, I knew that every single day was going to have a quote from somebody, where it's Mahatma Gandhi or Muhammad Ali or Steve
Randy
Jobs
Bosch.
or
Yeah.
whoever. Yep. So I would have a quote that, and then I would have analysis and discussion around it. And I wanted an action item because I didn't want this to be a pen and ink philosopher sort of book where you read it, oh, that's nice, that's wonderful, I'll think about that. No, you need to do something.
Right.
Motivation comes from action, from movement. So every single day you needed to do something, whether it was smile at 5 people today or write down 5 things that you're upset with somebody about and literally you say I forgive you for X and cross them off, or call that one person who's very important to you or that you haven't talked to in a while. So having an action item so that you're translating this from theory to reality in some capacity. So I came up with that sort of structure. Then there were certain days in the year that I wanted certain things. So for example, on May the 4th, Star Wars Day, I obviously wanted a quote from Yoda. And then I built some things around that. I wanted something Irish for St. Patrick's Day. So there were a couple of days like that. But then I went and I started researching quotes to be able to build out the rest of this and built all the quotes. So I had this sort of theme. I'd come back to different ideas throughout the year because that more organic approach would be able to help reinforce some of these concepts. And that way I wasn't quoting the same person too many times or going too similar in certain things. Then I sat down and I started writing. But once I started getting the momentum going, all right, I'm done with the quotes. All right, now I'm going to write 2 days per day. I started getting into it and the writing became easier because I was getting the consistency every single day. I was like, all right, let's crank out 2 days at least. And it's like, all right, 20 minutes, I'm done with 2. I'm going to keep going. And
Right.
some days what I wrote was absolute crap and I'd get rid of most of it. It happens. I spent over 1,000 hours after the research of just literally sitting there writing the book. So I got to the point though where there was less bad stuff that I'd want to remove and higher quality things coming out, and the writing was going faster and smoother and more powerful. And that was because I was getting the consistency. I was getting the compounding. The more you write, the better of a writer you are. The more you do martial arts, the better martial artist you are. The more you lead, the better of a leader you are. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hours for mastery. And as you approach it, you become better and easier. Robert Greene, when he was talking about about writing the book Mastery, was saying that the first research components were difficult, and then he started writing it, and it was a little bit difficult. But as he moved further in the book, it flowed easier and easier because he was comfortable. He had that compounding from all the years that led up to it and the specific efforts around that particular project. And this is the sort of thing that we see over and over again. So give yourself enough time to do your research, to consolidate the skills, to get the information that you might not even know that you need at this point. That's one of the reasons why every single day you should be trying to learn new things, simply because you don't know when those resources from your little side quests are going to be valuable to your main quest down the road. But keep doing that consistently so that when you sit down, then you can really get into it and you get into the flow. And not every day is going to be perfect, but if you show up every single day and work, just like Stephen King said, you're going to be able to get the better results.
Yeah, I can again see the engineer in you breaking down that vast project into small, manageable portions.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You know,
Exactly.
how do you build a building? One brick at a time. So if you've got this glorious thing that you're trying to achieve, whether it's a unicorn of $1 billion valuation, or writing a book, or cleaning up your kid's room, you break it down into little components. So like my kid, all right, we're going to pick up 50 Legos. All right, we accomplished that. All right, we can goof around for a couple months. All right, we're going to pick up another 50. All right, we can goof around for a couple minutes, but that couple minutes of goofing around is a little bit shorter because he's getting into it. Hey, let's pick up 60 Legos this time. Okay, and obviously my kids have a lot of Legos, engineers, but we just keep doing it, and he gets to the point where it's like, all right, let's get going. Hey, look, I can see some floor. Hey, look, we're proceeding. And all of a sudden, hey, buddy, we're done. Let's go have fun. And that's the same thing, whether it's the Sprint trying to release a video game like a bunch of my buddies did multiple times, or you're trying to do a renovation project on the house, or you're working towards whatever physical activity it is. You do that sort of thing, and you're going to see that compounding effect out there, and it becomes easier and more fun the further along the path that you are. And one of the cool things is with human development, with business building, there is no finish line.
Right.
Okay, we just keep going, and yeah, we get celebrations along the way, but there's another cool challenge ahead. And you get to the point where, like, all right, let's roll up our sleeves, let's have some fun with this. And when you get to that mindset, it's no longer work. You're getting paid to play.
Right. Yeah. 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 So coming back to your book, I've been thinking of using it. I journal every day. So I've been
Mm-hmm.
thinking of using it as a trigger for my journal where
Mm-hmm.
it sets the theme for the day. At the start of the day, I'm thinking of reading your book, seeing what is the expected thing for the day. And at the end of the day, when I journal about how my day went, I want to close the loop
Yep.
based on what I read. So, is this something how you have visualized, and have you seen others
I've
thinking
seen
about using this?
others. I've seen others use it this way because I don't do any formal journaling because I'm sitting down and I'm writing anyway, and I
Right.
write multiple times throughout the day. I probably write for 2 to 3 hours a day, just from what I do. And when I get inspired, I have index cards on me all the time, so I literally have lines and lines and poems and ideas for another thing that I'm working on. So that's just in my nature. It's a habit that's spread throughout. So I don't formally sit there and journal like some people do, but I formally sit there every single morning and I read my page in my book. And then I have to do my action item. And sometimes it's really difficult to do that action item because I'm a human being. I'm not a machine. I want to avoid tough situations at times.
Right.
I want to avoid that difficult discussion. I don't want to rock the boat all the time. Or I don't want to challenge myself. It's, oh, I'm good enough. I'm making progress. Ooh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that scares me a little bit. That hurts. I got to do it. So, for example, let's choose a day. So we had actually mentioned May 4th earlier
Right.
because it was Star Wars Day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So May 4th, the quote is, much to learn you have. And then we have discussion around it. The only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. Socrates. You cannot learn that which you think you already know. Epictetus. In the Japanese martial arts, there's the ideal of beginner mind, Shoshin, where things must be approached with openness and the wonder of a child experiencing it for the first time. And we go on, we have discussion about that for a whole page. And then the action item, learn something completely random today and try to fit into your worldview or work. Repeat daily to stay mentally young and flexible. So I'm going to ask you, Harish, your day is much further along than mine. What's something new that you've learned today?
Yeah. So, I picked up a few things from a couple of calls, work calls that we did, but they were interesting because they spoke about how things happened in their organization. And that was
Mhm.
a revelation for me, the way those practices were being followed. And I'm planning to pick some of them for our company as well. Right.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
So you've learned from their exposure and so you've written it down. Now, when you're journaling tonight, you're probably going to have some additional insights or lessons based on the different people that you've talked to, the different things that you've seen that you can now draw from. And when you put it down, when you actually write it, you're solidifying it in your brain a lot better. It's haptic feedback. That's why I write most of my poems. That's why I have clients write down ideas and stuff because it gives them better learning. That's when you're practicing language, you write down what you're doing or your goals, your visualization. I want to sell 1 million bucks. So I write 1 million, 1 million, 1 million over and over because it makes the body and mind buy into that. And
Right.
so that's the same sort of concept there that goes with your journaling. And so it solidifies it in your mind and your book when you actually put it that way.
Yeah.
So, how do you then turn around and further apply this?
Yeah. So it's usually the next day when I'm reflecting upon
Mhm.
the past. I also try to think of ways in which I have actually practiced what I've learned as an insight. Because the insight could be very theoretical, right? Like how
Mhm.
I mentioned that I heard about these practices. But yeah, at this point of time, it's more out, it's just about curiosity, right? I learned about something new, interesting. I've written it down. But because I've written it down, it is already there in my mind.
Yep.
Unless I actually do something about it, I feel like it's all some of these things. It's an interesting, good thing that you should pick up. If you're not doing that, then it's not of any use. So, which is
And
where I
the
do
other
that.
thing is you're trying to apply it, but maybe that idea is something that you pull out down the road. That's one of
Yes.
those
Yeah.
resources where you're like, oh, I have this to
Correct.
help us today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a continuous, it's a process of self improvement of that little bit, that 1% compounding betterment every single day. That's a great technique for actually taking the concept and applying it and making it real. Because I bet if you looked back at your journals for the past year, 2 years, and did a quick skim through them, you would realize how many of those concepts and ideas you're actually integrating into your daily activities without consciousness of it at this point.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on that note, I also wanted to ask you, Joe, about the books, people, podcasts that have influenced your thinking, shaped your life in general, and what would you recommend to our listeners to go pick up? It could even be people to follow on social media.
Yep. So one thing that I've found, well, Tim Ferriss for a long time was doing a lot of stuff. He's narrowed it down in a lot of ways. He's only doing stuff once a week. He's really good. If you want stuff with a real edge, look for Mark Manson.
Yeah,
He wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving an
right.
F. He now puts out one piece of new material a month in the first week of the month. I think it's the first Monday. So those are both good ones. Jordan Peterson gives another good insight. If you're running an organization, Jocko Willink, because of his military experience, he's been able to bring a lot of things in there and go well beyond what you would normally think of as a strict business influence. The Art of War by Sun Tzu has been talked about, but The Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, Bruce Lee's The Art of Jeet Kune Do, even going and taking all that and then looking at painting and saying, what can I pull from here? What can I appreciate from here? Taking a walk in the woods, by the way, is underrated in terms of how important it is. Just getting out in nature for a couple of minutes to reset and let your mind reconnect and think and eliminate the chaos from our modern world. Things like that. Um, I listen to, there's a whole bunch of different motivation channels on YouTube that I just randomly choose them and they draw from literally hundreds of different individuals. And so it mixes it up. Use music. One of the big things that I do is before I'm getting ready to do a podcast like this, I actually have one song that is my Flip the Switch song, Prince of the Universe by Queen. So I can just hear the first opening strains and all of a sudden I'm in go mode, walk up music. So find what that is so that if you're getting ready to perform, whether it's going in front of a sales pitch, whether it's a meeting with your boss, whether it's a meeting with the investors, whether it's whatever, it's an athletic endeavor, you can use that to be primed for it. Those are all little things. And one of the things that I do is I actually ask people all the time. I don't say, hey, how you doing? My question when I meet somebody is, what are you reading? What are you learning?
Right.
And so you can get a lot of insight because other people are pursuing completely different endeavors, but you can get a lot of really cool ideas, insight, new guidance from asking a question like that is more growth oriented.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
So
have the
what are you reading currently, Harish, so that I can pick something up?
yeah, so here I actually read a bunch of things in parallel. So
Mhm.
while I'm reading a book on the untold story of Flipkart, which is one of the big
Yep.
startup poster boys of the startup world of India. I'm also reading a book called Managing the Professional Services Firm, which comes highly recommended, especially for a company like us, by somebody who's, whom we respect a lot. So he has recommended this book. Also been listening to Huberman Lab podcast.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's been a big favorite over the last 6 to 8 months. And he talks a lot about self hypnosis. In fact, when you mentioned about the listening to the song as your go-to one, right?
Yep.
I was reminded of going into the self hypnosis trance, right? It's
Yeah.
similar.
That's the visualization I had with winning
Correct.
that tournament,
Yeah.
or writing down the goal every single day so that you're programming your reticular activation system to see opportunities towards that.
Right.
And the subconscious that we were talking about, where you review your goals, if you tell yourself, I can't do this yet, it's programming the mind to figure out the way to achieve that, the
Right.
obstacle being overcome. So these are all different ways to look at the gem, that jewel that is our
Right.
business and our life. And we look
Yeah.
at different facets to pull out what is most appropriate at that point.
Yeah, but I think the key thing in what you said is to have that learning lens on all the time, right? You have to be open and receptive to figuring out what I can learn from that situation, the circumstances, the book, the person, the podcast, the music, the painting. But you need to have that learning lens on.
Right? It's the growth mindset. And my father always called it looking for the pearl.
Yeah,
So, in fact, one of the talks that I do is called Pearls of Excellence, on some of the insight from the book. And it's in any meeting, in any podcast, in anything, looking for the one idea, the one concept, the silver lining, the connection, whatever, in every single thing. And so if you go through a day, you pick up a half dozen to a dozen pearls like this throughout the day. And then you can have greater gratitude, which then programs your mind in a slightly different way. And it creates that compounding again of the micro decisions being better, the gratitude being better, the mindset being better. It causes you to want to work out physically a little bit more. It reduces your stress. So your cortisol levels drop slightly. So your body actually heals a little bit more overnight. So it's that constant just attitude of what can I learn? What can I do? What can I grow? How can I help somebody? That is going to create that process of continuous improvement for your mind, your body, your spirit, your organization overall. And ultimately, that's how you build a wonderful life.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We've almost come to the end of the conversation, Joe. But we do this section with all our guests where we ask them for their hot takes on certain things that I will present to you, right?
Okay, I'm
So,
probably going to offend somebody. So if I do, too bad.
yeah. What I'll be asking you for is what do you think is the future relevance of whatever I'm going to ask you, right?
Okay.
So, first thing is what do you think is the future relevance of self help books?
I think that we're going to see a greater and greater adoption of this simply because even before COVID, we were seeing anxiety in the college level. I did a talk a couple of years ago in class of 2019. Roughly 40% of them had actually sought help for anxiety. And it was expected that roughly another 20% needed help but hadn't sought it. So you're seeing the majority of people from that demographic. So people 22 years old up to 30-ish. So that young wave of Zoomers coming into the market. And the attitude towards mental health has shifted tremendously with COVID and dispersed learning. So the decline of the traditional brick and mortar schools, they're having trouble with enrollment, not just from declining population, but people are like, why do I have to spend all this money to go have that experience when MIT's entire course catalog's on YouTube, when I can use Khan Academy, when I can use this, when I can, there's apps to be able to teach me. I can help myself with Duolingo, and I can do the same thing on mental health. As people have realized the importance of this again, and corporate culture has realized that we need to pay attention to it or else we're going to lose employees, which is one of the major things. I think that we're going to see in the 2020s, I want to call it a golden age for self-help books, but we're going to see a lot more of them coming out, and a lot of them are going to be very narrow, very specific in certain arenas, whether it's around communication for this or healthy eating in this capacity or balance. So you're not going to see necessarily the broad ones that completely revitalize your life and change everything. You're going to see a plethora of smaller, narrower ones coming from a variety of experts, and people are going to go about this in a completely a la carte manner, finding what works most appropriate for them. So we're going to have individually tailored self-help and mental help that people can go on their own journeys over the next 10-ish plus years. That's really going to have some pretty cool effects long range.
Yeah, yeah. Looking forward to that. What do you think is the future relevance of email newsletters?
Hmm. For a portion of the people, it's always going to work. And that's unfortunately the old saying in marketing that half my dollars are wasted. I just don't know which half. With email, we actually can get much better feedback as to what works and what doesn't work. And so we're going to continue to see that. But what I actually see is going to be more important than email is using visualization, using short videos, almost like a TikTok for whatever your service is. So if you're in financial services, sending out those 20, 30-second quick hits, the visual soundbite, because people don't read as much as they used to. And so if they can open something and get a quick visualization, because they're going to be able to get many times more information this way and hearing than they would just from reading, and they can do it while they're doing something else, they're still going to be much more effective. So I actually think that email newsletters are going to be good for more complex information as a resource to click here to find more, things like that. But if you want stuff that is actually going to change the dynamic, that's going to build trust, that's going to lead to people buying, whether it's buying a product or buying your service or buying into you as an individual or an organization, so marketing in that capacity, that we're going to see a lot more micro video than the emails.
And the final one, what do you think is the future relevance of Major League Baseball?
Oh, dude, I'm wearing my Yankees tie here. All right. I am a diehard Yankees fan, so I'm really upset because we need baseball more than ever right now. In terms of baseball, hopefully they get rid of this stupid 7-inning doubleheader thing, because that's not real baseball, that's high school baseball. They are trying to institute a pitch clock because they want to speed up the game, and it's not necessarily speeding up the game, because baseball is meant to be a slow game. It's agrarian. It's not supposed to be constant action. You're supposed to be able to sit there and eat your Cracker Jacks and talk to the person next to you and meet the person in the stands and interact. So it's a social thing. That's attending games. Yes, more games are consumed via TV, radio. I listen to probably 150 Yankees games a year, actually, while I'm doing other things, because that's part of the way things have gone. But one of the things that they need to do is that they need to remember that baseball is eternal in a lot of ways. Still, you take the ball, you throw it over the plate, and you try and strike somebody out, and they try and hit the ball. So they've eliminated the shift supposedly, which is a good thing, because stacking everybody on one side, that is changing it too much. So baseball is going to continue to be relevant because you have this multi-generational connection. The one huge regret I have with my mom passed on 8 years ago is that we never got to go see a Yankees game together. Okay, so my kids have all been to the new stadium. In fact, I went to the first game at the new Yankee Stadium opening season, only Yankees game I've seen them lose. And so, like, my friend who attended that game died last year. There were three of us who went. One of them is now gone. And so every single time I see anything about Yankee Stadium, I'm always going to remember that individual.
Right.
And so these emotional ties that we have that go down through generations, whether it's at the major league level, the minor league level, because I can talk about watching Derek Jeter play in the minor leagues here and things like that. It is having that sort of connection that is going to be important. And so the future of Major League Baseball is glorious if they can remember that baseball is the American pastime. It's
Right.
not meant to be, consumed in small things and quick hits, and it is meant to be an emotionally connective thing where you remember and you talk about, hey, remember when we went to this game at Yankee Stadium and it was raining and Greg Bird hit that grand slam in the first inning? And my dad remembers that game. And my kids went to that game with us and they remember, and they'll talk about 20 years from now, remember when grandpa took us to that game? And
Right.
so Major League Baseball needs to remember that is those sort of things, those memories. And if they can continue to do that, then baseball, if they can get through this stupid negotiation of the labor shortage or the lockout, if they can get through that, they can continue to bring fans in, whether it's fans from the United States or Mexico or Venezuela or Japan or India or wherever, because of the universal appeal of the relations and emotions and stories.
Yeah, yeah. I think that sort of resonates with my views about cricket, which is
Yep.
considered to be the national pastime of India. So I can very well resonate with your thoughts on it. So final word, Joe, we wanted to give our listeners some details about the book, where they can
Yep.
purchase it and how they should go about it. So if you can talk about that.
So it's available on Amazon. It should be in your local bookstores. You can get it from my website, everyday-excellence.com. I'd recommend that you go there because we have all sorts of supplemental material. We put out 5 different microblogs per week. There's a list of all the podcasts. So this one will be available there if they want to tap into it. And for your listeners, if they use the code THINQ, THINQ, at checkout, they can actually get a discount on the books.
All right, I think that's very generous. So, on that note, Joe, thanks a lot. This was a great conversation. We riffed about a lot of things that are close to our hearts. And speaking to you, it's what 9 p.m. here for me in India, but I'm really tempted to go for a run myself.
You charged you up. I did my job.
Yes,
Everyone needs a good cup of Joe to energize them.
yeah, yeah. On that note, thanks a lot, Joe. This was a fantastic conversation.
Harish, thank you. I learned a lot and I had a blast. Be excellent and grow today.